I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome everyone to GM Tools, Gaming with Kids, where today we're going to talk about the many differences in gaming with kids, some tips from Linda's pretty deep experience in talking about gaming with kids, running games for kids, and just the differences. There's perks, there's drawbacks,
and considerations
too.
which don't necessarily fall into perk or drawback because they're just different.
Yep. That's right. Mostly it's just considerations.
Yes.
But there are some things that are just like, you're only going to see this when you're gaming with kids.
Yeah, certainly. So, to get started off with this, I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about which sorts of games to choose, and because that's kind of the first step. So,
when you say kids, is there like a way that we would split them out by age group and then give different advice?
Yes, certainly. Certainly that was part of what I was gonna say here, but that's important to. But that's certainly important to note that. And this is actually something that we ran into a lot with the Pathfinder and Starfinder Academy ideas, where it was like, if you're going to, how do you make a program that's going to work for a 6-year-old and is also going to work for somebody who is also going to work for a teenager?
That's a really good question, Linda. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, the point is that the things are, you can't have one approach. You need to have a graduated approach, and also recognize that.
I see what you're doing there. Graduated.
And also recognize that the thing that that kids are very different. They're gonna grow at different rates. They're going to be. Kids are going to have different attention spans. They're going to have different desire and ability to engage with certain aspects of the game. So you can't say, like, this is exactly what will work for all 6-year-olds. This is exactly what will work for all 8-year-olds. It's very individualized. So when presenting advice, it makes sense to consider, like, younger versus older kids generally, but that, it's not necessarily going to hold true in all cases. I think that, and parents are really going to be in the best position to know where their kids are at. But in terms of games to play, obviously we have at Paizo beginner boxes, which are simpler versions of the games of Pathfinder and Starfinder that are out there. And we have the upcoming Pathfinder beginner box for 2nd edition, which will certainly be a good addition to that suite. So,
yep.
I mean, you guys.
Notably, in the 2nd edition beginner box, it's the same game but with just fewer options, so it's easier to get into it. Because we think that Pathfinder 2nd edition is something that you could teach to younger kids more easily than Pathfinder 1st edition or Starfinder.
Because frankly, those giant core rule books are like, yeah, they're pretty intense for younger players. So, but other than beginner boxes, you can also there's also other games out there, like I have experience with Mouse Guard, the Mouse Guard RPG for younger players. Mouse Guard's a really good one because first of all, there's the appeal of just playing heroic mice, and the general theming of these small creatures who are often perhaps underestimated by the larger wildlife, who band together heroically to defend their kingdom and to save people and to protect people. And there's also of course the Mouse Guard comic series that is tied to that. So I would say Mouse Guard's a good one. That's one that I have experience with. I have not.
Which uses the burning wheel system.
It uses the burning wheel system.
And has other benefits for kids.
One of the great things about the burning wheel system, in general, but also for kids, is that in burning wheel, if you want to get better at something, you can't just get better at something by always succeeding. If you want to get better at something, you also have to fail. And I think that that's a really good structure and a really good lesson for kids, that progress isn't just a set of constantly succeeding at things. To progress in something and get better, you have to challenge yourself, and that means that sometimes you're going to fail, and then you're going to have to pick yourself back up. So that's one of the things that really appeals there, and that also means that also helps kids to reframe those failures as progress toward yes.
And plus, it also, Burning Wheel is, if you think that Pathfinder 2nd Edition sort of has some things in it that talk about using failing forward a little more than 1st Edition and Starfinder, where you might just stop the adventure, Burning Wheel is, like, entirely fail forward, and so is Mouse Guard. So, like, if you are trying to find your way to the place you're supposed to go in the adventure and you fail the survival-y equivalent, you will find your way there. You might get sick from being out in the cold too long, or hungry, or both, or angry that you got lost so many times, or like all of those things which are negative conditions. But you will find your way there after making that check, whether you succeeded or failed.
And another one, and I don't personally have experience with this one, but I've seen a lot of great things about it that's out there, is No Thank You Evil, which has first of all a very the theming and the theming of it is very tailored toward being a family friendly game, and it also has sort of that graduated process that I was talking about, where there's different levels of complexity that people can engage with the rules to make it appropriate for all ages. So I certainly recommend taking a look at that game as well. And another thing to consider with games is that you don't have to play a game with literally all of the rules that the game has. So one of the special events that I've run several times at conventions is a game called, or an adventure called Case of the Disappearing Wizards. And in Case of the Disappearing Wizards, nominally kind of uses the Pathfinder beginner box rules, but it strips things down even further. It removes a lot of the skills. It is completely it's completely theater of the mind. It doesn't have a map, and in a lot of cases, while characters technically do have like little attacks that they can do, a lot of things are more narrative driven, like the cat character can become invisible, and it's not like, yes, you have this invisibility spell you cast or whatever. It's just, yes, once you reach a certain point in the story and you regain some power from those wizards that had gone missing, then the cat character can just be invisible, or the bearded dragon character who can breathe a little bit of fire, but if they get some special fire breathing potions from their potion master wizard, then they can breathe a lot of fire. Or the turtle. The turtle gains water powers, which maybe they'll use that to create a giant water jet. Or maybe they'll use that to move the water out of the way so that their friends can go underwater. But the powers there are a lot more narrative, and it's more about like creating fun and over the top mechanical expressions for what the characters decide that they want to do.
But it's like vaguely based on the PF2
but
rules.
There's still like initiative to determine turns. You still have hit points. You still do have those basic attacks. You still have those skills. You still have skills presented for like, okay, who's better at noticing things, who's better at, everybody knows some spellcraft, has this kind of knowledge and things like that. But that one was very much a like you have the skill or you don't have the skill type thing for the knowledges. It wasn't like it was also with Pregen's very tailored to make sure that characters had different strengths so that they would each have a moment to shine, because having a moment to shine is important for players of all ages, but it's especially important for younger players to make sure that everybody gets to feel cool and everybody gets to feel awesome, and that time is fairly divided among them for Spotlight, and also that the types of encounters that you present are going to be, if you have encounters that if the kids that you're playing with have different things that they're going to be interested in terms of the game, that each of them gets a chance to do that part. So if some players are more interested in exploring and looking at what kind of cool things they can find, some are more interested in talking and making friends, and some are more interested in punching the bad guys, that all of those aspects are part of the adventure, and the kids understand that, sometimes you're going to take turns so that we can do what this person likes, and that means that we're going to be able to come back later and focus on what you want to see. Because these topics all do kind of blend together.
Yep.
And I saw mentioned before about attention span and time. Games with kids, like, you're not, particularly with younger kids, like, you're not going to sit down and be like, we're going to play this game for 4 hours straight. Like, that's just not a good idea. Instead, kids' games are generally going to have much shorter slots. And they're also going to have more breaks in the middle. So one thing that I found to be very useful is, because kids also aren't going to necessarily recognize when they need to take a break, particularly younger kids. So planning breaks in the middle for, like, okay, let's all get up and move around. Let's all get up and move around and stretch and get some water if anybody needs to go to the bathroom or whatever. Is super useful to break up the action. Another thing that I've often done with kids games is bring something that they can use to express their character artistically. So I bring paper and crayons and pens and pencils and stuff like that, and encourage them to draw and doodle during the game, so that they can, because that's a way to sort of fill time whenever they're not doing the thing that they would necessarily want to do the most, and also get more into that character. Another thing that can be really fun is having kids set the action and what happens next through having them interact with the maps. This is something I was running a beginner box conversion of Weeby Goblins, and so Weeby Goblins has too many encounters for the younger set. I had the players were, I believe, between 4 and 7 years old at that table. So we did an encounter in the beginning, and then I put out a bunch of colorful markers on the table, and I put out a battle map, and I said, okay, well, your goblins go into the woods. What's in the woods? And gave them and said, why don't you guys draw out for me what's in the woods, and then your goblins can explore that. So yes, there were the things that would have naturally been in the woods, but there was also the cave of puppies, because while adult dogs may be scary, puppies are okay because they're still fluffy. There were the giant Minecraft statues. There was the helpful man in the middle of the woods who had fireworks that he wanted to give to goblins because fireworks are cool and goblins are nice.
Wasn't there an amethyst bridge?
There was a bridge made of amethyst. There was an island with a friendly unicorn, and there were all sorts of other stuff there too. So that was a lot of fun, because then they drew out this woods, and when they went through the woods, it wasn't the encounters that were already there. It was, let's go visit and engage with these various encounters that they had drawn out on the map in great color and detail.
So they were sort of co-GMs.
Yeah, so they were sort of co-GMs. It's an example of a way to... So I guess that's an example of the idea of bringing kids in to deciding what's going to happen next. So I think that the Fate system, Fate Core, also is good for... has that baked in sort of to the... baked into, and I'm sure there's skins on that are more specifically for kids, but the idea that the players are all very much involved in telling the story and shaping the narrative, because kids are, some of us adults retain our imagination just fine too, but kids really do an amazing job with imagination and storytelling, and they're not going to be so constrained by the familiar storytelling tropes, by the idea that this is the way that something should be done, that this is the way that things have to fit together. And so there's so much joy and so much creativity that comes from really exploring the imagination of a child. And I think that we can learn a lot from children in that way, and from keeping our own inner children alive.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Wizards of the Coast did a Pokemon Junior adventure aimed at kids with nice ideas for younger players. That's a good suggestion. I'm sure that folks can find that online. If you have a link to that to pop in the chat, that would be great. Pony Finder, yes, certainly. Pony Finder is a great RPG for people who are interested in
My Little Pony.
In My Little Pony, which I know that there's a lot of folks who are. And people saying that people like that a lot of kids like pet classes. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Mm-hmm.
So those are a good thing to keep in mind. Really, I would say that with character building, but with character building, you can come with pre-generated characters for a short session. It's good to engage kids in what they want to see in their characters, and to help, like, even if you are building a character for a younger player, talking to them about what kinds of things they want to see to make sure that the character is going to do what they want. So we've talked about previous episodes about sort of the yes but or yes and model of when the player wants to do something and there aren't clean rules that describe how to do it. It's good to still work with them to find a way to get that expression. And there's still going to be some cases where it's like, I walk up to the king and I say, give him all the treasury, I want money. Like, not every idea that players have is necessarily going to manifest itself in the way that they want. But encouraging players to express themselves creatively by finding ways for those solutions to either maybe it doesn't work exactly how they plan, but it can still lead to something interesting, or it can still lead to a silly moment. If the character goes up into the king and says, "Give me all of your money because I want it," then the king might say, "Really? You want me to give you all the money that this kingdom needs to take care of its people because you want it? Now, why would I do something like that?"
Because I want it.
Because you want it. Well, you know what? You've got some guts. I'm definitely not going to give you all the money, but there's some things that this kingdom could use some brave heroes to help out with. And if you can help me out there, then I can give you some of the money. How does that sound?
All of the money.
I already said that's not going to be on the table.
All of the money plus your crown.
Oh, you are a funny one. But at any rate, yeah. Let's see. At any rate, yeah, like, we're working with that, and because just like in real life, characters in games aren't going to give you everything that you want. You ran a sandbox for 8-year-olds, and they decided that they wanted to destroy an entire planet.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely true that it's definitely true that kids are also more likely to come up with the solutions that are just burn and destroy all the things, than adult players. And it's sort of your decision as the GM. Like,
I don't even know. I've run with kids who haven't done that, but the number of adult players who said they wanted to torch the entire Black Rose Museum, just with all the people inside, is pretty high.
I think that's a matter of finding ways that they can channel those sort of let's break things impulses let's break things impulses without doing things that just are gonna be uncomfortable at the table. Like, you don't, like, let's blow up an entire planet. Like, yeah, you don't really necessarily want to play the game where you blow up an entire planet. I would say that that it also goes back to the kinds of things that, because it matters also as the GM that you're running a game that you're comfortable with and that you don't feel is going to be like sending a bad message there. But if you're comfortable with it, yeah. So exactly here, you let them blow up the planet. The rest of the game was being chased by space police. So they blew up the planet, but you didn't like zoom in on exactly what happened there. But then they saw sort of the natural consequences of those actions. So I think that's a good way to handle that for your group. And then other GMs, if they weren't comfortable with that, then they could do that. Yeah. So no gore and details exactly. I think that cartoons are a great source of inspiration for how to handle some of the violence in these games. I know that when running for younger players, so I've definitely had things where it's like, when you defeat them, sort of the Team Rocket blasting off again style of like, and you smack into them with your hammer and they go flying through the sky and they're like, we will meet again type styles, because you're not going to be, particularly for the younger kids, you're not going to be describing the violence in a graphic way. If it's described in a more comedic way, then it's more that it's more approachable.
Then it's comic mischief.
It's comic mischief.
Is
yes.
that what the rating is for like
mischief.
Video games for comic
mischief?
mischief?
And there's nothing stopping you from say, what if the kids are the ones describing the fatalities? I mean, if you're comfortable with that and they're all comfortable with it, right? GM. Yep. Because, certainly the ideas of comfort contains mild peril is your favorite description. Certainly the ideas of comfort and consent in gaming are not just for older players. They're also for younger players as well. It's important it's a great opportunity to talk to kids about making sure that everybody's comfortable and having a good time at the gaming table, and making sure that you're enforcing those boundaries and those lines.
Like, some kids will want to blow up the entire world, and some won't be okay with goblins fighting dogs because they don't want the dogs to get hurt.
Yes.
And you need to know which type of kid player you have before you blow up a dog world, or don't blow up a world that they want to blow up.
We also have talked before about how, like, if what players want is fundamentally different, then sometimes, you don't necessarily want to have them playing together in the same group. And kid players are going to have a lot less patience in general than adult players for not getting the types of things that they want to get out of the game. So splitting those things out more. Kids certainly censoring as much as your children are capable of dealing with, absolutely. So, and again, parents running games for their kids are going to know a lot better about that. So if you're running for kids that you don't know, always erring on the sides of being more careful is a good way to go. And I'd say that if you're gaming with kids, of course, if you're gaming with kids in a public venue, and this is something that I have had issues with sometimes, it's not a daycare. So, like, I've had experiences where it's like, parents need to be present, and then parents are just like, and it was like, okay, this is a 4-hour slot, you can come. I had like a 4-hour slot at a convention. It said, parents, you can bring your kids in or out of the session whenever you want to, whatever they like. Their characters can come and go. We'll weave them into the story, whatever they're comfortable with. I had a parent who decided that was licensed to drop their young children off at the beginning of the session and not come back until 4 hours later when their kids didn't have food.
That's prime bar time, Linda, at PaizoCon.
Oh, no. Or any things like that. So, please do feel comfortable, please do, like, as the GM, enforce those sorts of things of making sure that parents do stick around. And if parents do wander off, then if parents do wander off, then make sure that you have a way to contact them. What did I do with that kid? The only food that was around was the only food that was around was a bit of candy that was out in the like sort of and that was out in the nearby area. There was like some chocolate mints. So since the only food that was around was some chocolate mints, so you gave her some chocolate mints and some water, and made sure that and delegated one of the other parents who was there, one of the other female parents, to be the one to like sort of be the one who can take her to the bathroom and things like that. Sugar them up and send them back. I see. Well, what else am I supposed to do? There was no other food around, and I basically just did the best to. I kept her entertained for. Honestly, I kept her entertained for the 4+ hours.
For the entire slot.
That's what I did.
Isn't it funny that we're doing a show about gaming with kids, and we had to talk about someone wandering away from the table and not being found? It was not the kid.
I've never had a kid. I've never had a kid bolt from my table, but I have had a parent bolt from the table and not give me contact information. Fun. But you know what? It actually worked out okay. I kept her entertained throughout the entire time, and I had a conversation with the parent after the fact. I also had an issue with another issue with a parent and another thing who bolted, and their kid was poorly behaved, and we had to go get that parent to come back. But I knew how to get that parent, so I had to get that parent to come back so that the other players would be able to have a good time, because that kid just would not listen to any sort of thing about like anything being in the way that he didn't want it to be. So, yes, learning experience. Do keep the parents at hand. They're going to know their kids the best.
Yep. But
yeah.
You know what? A lot of the times that you've done it at conventions has been great. We're just talking about the times that parents ran away.
Yep. Parents, in these types of games, though, it can be really fun to have parents playing, too. My general rule for kids games has been fill the slots with kids, and then any remaining slots are open to parents. And
didn't you have one with the familiar game where the kids decided to play like the older, wiser familiars, and like the young upstart familiar was being played by the mom? And
yes, the mom was playing the most like irresponsible and carefree one. I love the experience of having I think she was 5 or like about 5 years old.
Wasn't she the one who played the oldest?
She played the oldest one, and she's like, "No, I'm the oldest." She said. She said to the mom, "I'm the oldest. You need to listen to me. That's not a good idea. That's dangerous.
Don't light things on fire.
Don't light things on fire." So that was really fun for both for me and for the kid and for the parent, to have the kid be the one who's like telling the parent that like they need to be responsible and be safe and follow the rules and do the mission, and then the parent be like, "Oh, okay, I guess we need to follow the mission."
Yep. So that's Linda's adventure where the party are familiars and something has happened to the wizards.
Yes.
It's the case of the
disappearing wizards.
And the turtle is like the one that's like, all right, guys, but the bearded dragon is a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. The bearded dragon wants you to know that he is actually a dragon.
Yes.
Or she or they. The characters have. The characters in this game have sort of default names and genders, but I think that's another thing too, is even when you're providing pre-generated characters, having sort of a default name gender to use in case the kids don't have one they want, but letting the kids choose about their characters' name and gender and personality and appearance and things like that. Because those things don't require any sort of mechanical, any sort of knowledge of the mechanics of the game. So they almost never use the default names.
Mm-hmm. Rico says he's never GM for kids, but he's GM for teenagers as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I have GM for kids in the sense that, like, my youngest brother really wanted to play, like, while my group and I were teenagers, and so sometimes he did. So I GM for him, but that was mostly it in terms of GMing for younger kids.
So,
I haven't run as many convention slots as Linda.
So after I mentions doing No Thank You Evil, what was, I mean, I just mentioned it here, but I haven't actually played the game. What was your experience?
It looks like it's
Gecko King.
it looks like it's roughly Cypher system. Yeah, Wither King, the bearded dragon who thinks he's an actual dragon, works for, like, the potions expert wizard and has, like, an elixir of fire breath to do, like, a... See, look, I'm a dragon.
Poor Darius. Darius is the potions expert, and he's always just, like, he wants to... It's like, his familiar is helpful in crafting things, but his familiar is always getting into mischief, so he's just like, ugh.
What is it? It's the bearded dragon, the turtle, the cat, and the bat. Are those the ones?
There's also a dog, but the dog is an NPC.
Oh, yeah, that's the one that's the NPC. That's the fifth familiar.
Yeah.
All right. So what other tips do you have for GMing with kids?
So let me think. I know we hit on some of the major. I pretty much just stream of consciousness through a lot of the major stuff there. Let's see. So we talked about. So what about value? It's fun, honestly. I see a lot of suggestions that are maybe more comedic or humorous.
Call of Cthulhu, Ravenloft.
Call of Cthulhu and Ravenloft and things like that. But I think that this still gets an important point of considering what kinds of themes and stories are going to be appropriate. I mean I'm blanking on it. What's the name of the section in the second edition core rulebook about what's sort of expected? The Pathfinder baseline.
Pathfinder baseline.
Yes. The baseline is going to be different for younger players certainly than it is for adult players. But I mean, even with adult players, you're going to want to choose where that baseline is appropriate for your group, and that's going to be very much a matter of what's appropriate for those individual kids. Do you go for open choices or more structured ones? What do you do next, or do you follow the dog or stay with the cat? That varies depending upon the player and depending upon how they've engaged with those sorts of questions in the past. So, with kids, I would sort of probably ask that kind of first question first. What do you want to do next here? And see what kinds of things they give as answers. Because making sure that they are able to fly off the rails as they wish, and then work their way back. But if the answers are really like fundamentally not going to be workable with the game, or if they're not sure, then I'll migrate more towards structured decisions. So but if the answer to what do you do next is like, I want to make a stew for all my animal friends, then you can absolutely make a stew for all your animal friends for a few minutes. And like in the Mouse Guard game, the group wanted to make stew for their animal friends. So we stepped away from the table and we sat by the window for a while, and we pantomimed making stew for our animal friends. So like, you don't have to stay on task. Like, you really don't. But if the kid's like, I want to run away from this town and go do this other thing, and like the other and only some of them want to do that,
K-Word Jenks asks, with failure being such a foundation of RPGs, how do you navigate player frustration if they, quote, fail at something in the game? And we touched on this earlier, but picking a game that works well with failure for a first game for kids can be helpful. Mouse Guard and Burning Wheel, for example, has major fail forward, where when they fail, they get to it, but, like, their character's a little cranky about how long it took, maybe, and just like they might be cranky that they didn't get the best result. Plus, you can only get better at the skill by failing and succeeding with it a certain number of times. So if they learn that like, some systems talk about, like, the only way to really get better is to learn from your failures. But really, though, in Pathfinder, you could level up having never failed a single check. It's very unlikely, right? But it's not like they're going to be like, sorry, you didn't level up because you didn't fail. Most of them don't. In Burning Wheel, you actually do have to fail, and so it could be a good way to train the kids to be, like, happy because they got some of the failures they needed to level up. And then that might apply even into other games when failures don't help them leveling up, because they've started to learn that part of the improvised story that everyone is telling together is the failures, and that the failures are an important part of that story, just as the successes are, or else it would just be some kind of boring power trip where somebody succeeds constantly.
Yeah, and I think that it's also a matter of where you put the focus. And where you put the focus, and how much time you spend focusing on the sort of the fallout of a failure versus sort of moving on past it. So like if the kids are frustrated that they didn't do something, that they didn't succeed at something, then sort of moving on into the next adventure rather than being like and everyone in town is so disappointed in you. Like don't do that. So really, it's a matter of redirecting focus onto things that are more active and positive, or exploring consequences in a way that is more focused on what they can do now, as opposed to dwelling on the fact that the dwelling on the problem. And I did want to say one more thing about open choices or structured ones. What do you want to do next? Like, but younger players are a lot more likely to tell you, I find, more directly, to be able to express what it is that they want to explore or do, than adult players, actually. Like, so I would say that they do better with those open-ended questions. If you say Merc's network name backwards, it's Cram. That's now your headcanon name for bad Merc.
Cram.
Yes. Cram. The GM who rubs kids' faces in the times when they don't succeed, who sets up impossible challenges. Oh, that's another thing. Difficulty calibration and the expectation for the amount of success and failure. Certainly there are games that, someone mentioned Call of Cthulhu before as an example of one that wouldn't really be suitable. There are certainly games that have an overwhelming atmosphere of, like, struggling, but you're ultimately you're going to fail, and it's sort of like, how long do you hold out and things like that. So I'd say be cognizant of your game's balance of expectation of success versus failure, and when you do things, but also like Mark said, I mean, a game where everyone succeeds all the time, like, there's no tension in that story. So that's not going to be interesting in the long run.
So don't pick games where you're guaranteed to fail at a certain point with small children. Yes. Like Dread or 10 Candles or any of those. Mm-hmm. All right. I think, did we get all of your usual tips here, Linda?
I think so, because I mean, a lot of it beyond that is really individualized to the kid. And we've talked more about younger children here, than older children and teenagers, because that's going to be sort of even more individualized about whether they're going to engage with the game in the same way that an adult would, or whether they're going to need some more support. Right.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. And what you've offered as advice sort of spans a range from very, very, very young to just very young.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I think too. What about kids and GMing? Kids wanting to GM. I think that's something we're talking about.
There's been success stories of kids who have even gotten, like, to a ridiculous number of stars in Pathfinder Society at a very young age. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you have to know the kid, and it has to, obviously, if they're very young, they have to be, like, have a lot of qualities that not every kid has if they want to be able to GM in like GM a system, even some of these more simplified systems, as opposed to just do a make believe game with you that is not really GMing, but they say that they're GMing.
Yeah. So I would say that, I would say that with a kid GM, you know, there's always sort of the rule zero, like, you know, you don't have to, the GM doesn't have to incorporate any rules that they don't want to, but you know, it's important that they have the flexibility to decide what they you know, that they don't have to use all of these rules and things like that. But if you're sort of watching your kid getting into GMing and things like that, there are some things that they following the rules exactly obviously isn't important, but still the matter of making sure that people are having fun and people are getting a chance to express themselves and things like that. So you can help with sort of guiding toward that, because but you know, also, like, there, you know, there's going to be cases where GMs of all ages are going to decide that this is going to be me winning and you losing, and then people aren't going to want to play with them.
Rocks fall, everyone dies.
And you know, that can just play out on its own too. Like if somebody's GMing a game and they're just going to be like, aha, and my monsters kill you and I win, they're going to just naturally learn that people don't want to play that.
Yep.
Because, you know, making mistakes is part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Do people have any questions?
Well, they had a few questions up there, but you've answered them so far.
It can be difficult for younger kids as a GM to understand that an RPG isn't exactly a story.
Or it's an interactive narrative.
Yes.
It's a story that they don't know exactly how it's going to play out.
Yeah, natural consequences are usually very effective.
Mm-hmm.
Or rather, a story that they
Right.
aren't telling. Just a story that they aren't telling. Yeah, a story that involves the input from others.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that case that we've covered pretty much everything that you would normally cover in a Gaming with Kids panel, and we got some good questions here and some additional advice. Oh, actually, here's an interesting one from Yosarian. Has read teachers saying they've used RPGs to help kids with special needs, autism, etc. successfully.
Yeah. So I think that gets to why are RPGs beneficial for kids. I would say that so much of the tabletop RPG experience is about there's so much about communication, taking turns, the creativity, engaging with each other, providing cooperation, and also sort of math skills as well. Yep. With a lot of these RPGs.
It's just so much math, communication, and problem solving. I think I read somewhere about the use of it with autism was that sometimes the kids like needed very structured ways of thinking of things that the RPG provided, and also gave structured ways of interacting with other people.
Yeah.
That the kids were able to generalize and improve in those skills.
Mm-hmm. And I know that I had and also when you're playing with players with any sort of special needs or other considerations, it's important to keep that into account. So, for example, I know that we have played with a player with autism who has said to us, like, you know, that you know, for them, like, they're not going to know when someone's being suspicious and they should roll sense motive. So, like, going ahead and rolling that thing for them because they're not going to know when to prompt for it. So, I'd say so mentioning that sort of make that come up in my mind of ways to consider ways to sort of adapt the mechanics or the experience to work within the needs of your players.
Mm-hmm. Risky asks, what if a kid's character dies?
Let's see. want to. Well, there's this actually kind of a continuation of this.
Oh,
RPGs
okay.
can help learn social skills, reading skills, math skills, physics, and much more. It's also a safe place to express doubts, worries, concerns, and fears. Yeah, and anecdotally, some people on the autism spectrum identify with RPGs because it codifies the world and supplies rules for dealing with situations they find tricky in real life. Yeah, absolutely. And RPGs also very much they explore actions and consequences in a very safe way. And they also explore sort of how do people react to things, and how do people react to things, and what kind, and help with development of empathy as well.
Right. And Sarian, who brought up the question at first, also recalls that's what teacher was saying about the structured tasks.
Yes.
Making it feel like something that they struggled with because they couldn't just connect to it, had a structure that they could connect to more easily.
And you don't have to be able to give a speech that is good enough to win over the hearts and minds of the people. You don't have to be able to swing a giant sword well enough to defeat the monster. Your character can do things that you wouldn't be able to necessarily do. And I think that's very. I mean, the power fantasy is certainly there. And that can be really appealing as a way to explore situations that you wouldn't be able to explore in any other way. So let's see.
So there was the question about the kid's character dies, or if their pet pies / dies.
Yes. So I would say there's certainly a lot of room to explore. There's certainly a lot of room to explore solutions where there are alternatives, like being knocked out, for example, alternatives to death based on what the player's sort of comfort level is there, and if they are going to have a character or a pet die and then they're bringing in a new one, making sure to take some space to not like dwell on it, but also to sort of honor that character and show people being like, hey, we're really gonna miss this person now, and like let's do a celebration of them and things like that, and then being ready to have them come in with a new character, and I would say that for adult players, like if their character dies in the middle of a session, they may want to step away. They may not want to participate and engage in that rest of that session, and that's completely okay. And so being ready to accommodate that, and then ready to move in with the excitement of like, ooh, what can we do with this new character? It's like, hey, if somebody had a fighter as their, like say that somebody had a fighter as their first character, and they seem to be thinking like, oh, I kind of wish that I had a pet with my character or whatever, and then if we like, hey, I remember you saying that you kind of wanted this kind of thing, or that you wanted to see these sorts of things, and sort of guiding them more toward what they will be able to do that they couldn't do before.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So do we have any other questions or suggestions? I know folks have had a lot of really good thoughts in the chat here that I've been reading out for you too as well.
Looks like we got it this time.
All right, so let's go ahead and say goodbye to YouTube.
All right. Bye, YouTube.
Bye.
See you next time.